Welcome back to another video. This really popped when I saw it. That to me is a monster increase. Again, this book got hot. This book is ready to go higher. So let's jump right into it. We are back today with another statue review from Diamond Select Toys. Without further ado, let's get into the review. What is good, YouTube? This is Lawrence over at Mighty Comics and Collectibles, and thank you for joining me for an impromptu live stream. Believe it or not, I'm sitting around the house. I'm doing a million things this morning. I haven't sat still all weekend working on videos, stuff like that. I had a company reach out to me and ask me to do a video for their product, so I've been super busy, and I still wanted to come on it today to do an impromptu live stream. So I reached out on the Instagram community and said, who's available to come on right now? And let's just talk comics. And I have a very, very, very special guest. Everybody knows who he is because he is a big community member here in our comic community. So I'm going to bring him on in just a second. As you can see by the thumbnail, special guest. We're talking comics. And if you guys have questions for this particular gentleman, do me a favor, drop them in the chat, because I think he will try to get answers to most of them if he can. So one other announcement before I bring this gentleman on, because I know everybody wants to go ahead and get on the TV for football, except me and him probably, because we're both New York Jets fans. We were just talking about that before we started the show. So look for this on Tuesday. I am dropping another eBay sales video. I'm telling you what's selling right now on eBay. Check it out. A lot of great books are out there right now that are being sold for really good prices. And that's part of the reason we're going to have this guest on right now. So without further ado, let me bring him on. Everybody say hello to John, aka Newsstand Collector on IG. How you doing, bud?
How are you? Thank you, Lawrence, for having me.
No, man, great to have you on. I'm glad you answered my quick DM out there saying, "Hey, anybody want to jump on?" Because I've never had actually someone come on the show who actually does live feeds, live sales before. So this is a good intro to my channel. So let's start with this. How did you get into doing the whole live sale thing?
For better or for worse, it was probably because there was, like one main live sales that would go on. And I kind of felt like, sometimes they would put up a live sale at certain times when I wasn't available to come on. And I started following a lot of the guys that were always on the live sales. By the way, that is the best way to find a lot of the collectors who have, inevitably you'll find they have really great collections, is you go to the live sales, and I feel like you got to take advantage of it. You see a name pop up in comments or whatever, you just follow them. And in terms of like, I realized that maybe we need to expand and become a little bit more diverse, because there were a lot of other guys who had big collections that were not able to sell. There are a lot of comic book shops, brick and mortar, ma and pa's, who don't have access to the resources that this, larger, consignment page that would do live sales or still does live sales. So I figured, why not take a stab at it, especially since I started growing organically and, meeting a lot of the guys, and see where we're at. And that's pretty much just in short, an abbreviated way to say how I started.
So did someone approach you, or you approached other people about doing sales? You remember?
I did. I was more like the guy who sort of would start the conversation based on having some previous interaction with that person, whether I traded or bought something from them. I mainly do a lot of trades. That's how I get to know a lot of the guys in the community, because trading takes a lot longer than just saying claim and sending PayPal or whatever other mode of payment over. So, it's like sharing conversations, sharing photographs, doing live conversations, getting to know them. And, and sometimes, you gotta give a little bit more in order to get that one book that you want. So and of course the trust basis, which is important. So, that's how it is, just approaching myself and opening up the conversation.
How long? I mean, I'm going back to like the COVID era when I think the live stuff started, but it could have been before that. How long have you been doing it?
I've actually started during the COVID era in 2021. Some guys were, reaching out to me saying, I like myself, where I was going down to the cellar and I would look through boxes and I'd find, not just comics, but other collectibles that I had. And I thought, what do I do with these now? Especially since, like work was slowed down. There wasn't much activity going on. We thought, what are we going to do? And some of the guys reached out to me and said, I need to like make some money in order to pay the bills. And I was like, have you ever thought about doing live sales? And they're like, well, the fees on it are a little too much for me. And, I want to be able to, negotiate that. So I said, hey, look, I'd love to host you. I mean, you're the main attraction, but I'll take just jot down notes and make sure we have the right claim and the amount that book was claimed. If you're interested, just think of me as help. That's it. Not some kind of host, but just more of assisting the brick and mortar shop. And and that's how it panned out for the last 3 years.
So I hate to ask you this question, but it just came to my mind. So being where we started in 2020, roughly with the whole COVID, when the live sale started, has the rate gone up for hosting live sales, or has it stayed the same?
For me,
Yeah,
relatively
for you personally.
speaking, it is just incredible. In an hour to 2 hours, I would originally have people like no more than 100 to 150 people stream in that live video.
Oh
Now
wow.
I'm like over 1,000 collectors who are streaming in, and actually the numbers are growing. We get usually where we had like 10 to 15 guys in a room at the same time. Now I probably have between 75 and 125. And it's probably because there are a lot more collectors now that are taking advantage of the market.
Yeah. So if you guys don't know, I've said this since the beginning, since for the past few years that I've been on YouTube. I said if you don't have an Instagram account and you watch YouTube and you collect comics, the best place to go out and get comics, whether it's via trade or purchasing, is on Instagram in the community. Yes, sometimes you hit on eBay, sometimes you go to a show and you get a deal, but for the most part, I say it all the time, the live shows and of course the consignment pages, you get better deals there than anywhere else. So with that said, I'm just gonna flat out ask you, what are you seeing right now, especially with the live sales that you've been hosting, that not only are people are buying, but people are getting deals on?
Uh, Going back to just briefly touch up on it, that like the markets during the pandemic were what I would call, because my business is real estate, development. My wife and I are architects, and we do real estate development. And we know in the last 30 years about what we consider artificial markets in our business. And this was easily like I can translate it to you how I saw that in the comic book market during the time of COVID. And part of that is like, comics and film were part of the rush, the appetite to buy a comic book. And the idea that before the pandemic, things were scarce. And when I mean scarce, there were limited amounts of books that not necessarily meaning rare, but I think what happened was during the pandemic, people went into those boxes, took out those books, put them on, sent them to CGC, the census shot up. And so now inevitably, as we sort of like fast forward to 2024, even like just a few months ago in 2023, as you know, Lawrence, the buyers are at an all-time benefit in terms of this is a buyer's market. Let me just say one thing. What like I can tell you in 2021 in October of New York City Comic Con, a 4.5 X-Men #1 sold for $16,500. I mean, you take that book now and you go to a consignment page or on a live sales page, whatever it is, someone puts up that book is probably north of $8,500. So there's almost a 50% drop in the price of that book. And part of that is, the contributing factor of that is that, there are probably more books of that are being constantly traded. Heritage has a lot of auctions, multiple auctions, Comic Click, all these great places, eBay, you mentioned. So when the books are being moved all the time and more people are buying them, it almost seems like there were less and less buyers, during the COVID years. And now all of a sudden, like there is a link that we see that we can compare to see how many books were sold, and we can see part of the pricing would decrease. And part of that is maybe there are less buyers out there. I don't know. There could be other reasons for it. But right now, if you're going to a live sale on IG, you're probably buying a book at a way better price than any of the other places that I talked about, because guys don't charge tax. Sometimes they throw in shipping. The community is very, very generous. What I mean is sometimes you'll see guys who will say, hey, John, pin this comment. I will give $100 for anyone, contribute $100 for any book that anybody buys, $350 more. Right away, someone who sees a book at $500 is going to claim it because they know they're paying $400 because somebody is already paying $100. So, there's so many reasons to be on IG, to create an account. Doesn't matter if it's a comic book. There are a lot of guys who have personal accounts, which is telling that there are a lot more people coming in that are not necessarily comic nerds. When I mean comic nerds, like, Mighty Comics and Collectibles.
Like us, yes, like us. I was gonna say it. You could say it. It's okay. But all right. So you're still seeing a lot more people come into the hobby who may have not been here before. Unlike obviously 2020 around the COVID era, every time I jumped on a live stream, it seemed like every book was getting claimed. Now I feel like collectors, or at least at this point, are being a little picky to what they're choosing to buy. I definitely, when I'm on live streams, which is basically every day now, every time I get on my phone, there's a live stream going on, so I'm jumping on to see what they have. Is there books out there that people are asking for specifically that you can recollect? I know when I'm on a sale, I'm always asked, do you guys have this? Because I'm looking for certain things. So
yeah, I think right now the way to, if you are investing, let's just separate the investors from the collectors. Like if you're an investor in comics, you're buying gold, you're buying like early Batman, you're buying early Superman, you're buying what is called the blue chip, right? And you're buying also pre-code horror, which is a time where it's like it's somewhere between the gold and the silver, the atomic age of, and what people are searching there are subject matter, artists, the go on and on in terms of some sort of key that is in that book. But you still see a lot of the books which are called liquid in this market, which is like the ASM 129, the Hulk 181. And despite the Hulk 181 in the higher grade, which was almost like secure for keeping a price, it's become more volatile now. But the mid grade is the one that everyone can sort of like afford to buy, and those are the ones that, believe it or not, now I'm seeing while hosting the show, is that anywhere between like a 4 to a 6.5 Hulk 181, those things, those issues at those grades, everyone that is looking for it is buying them because the price is set. I think, like, your typical ASM 300s, those are people want the Venom, and anything ASM. Look, Spider-Man is Marvel, right? Yeah. And as a DC guy, I got to tell you, if I'm going over and buying a Marvel comic book, it's got to have Spider-Man on it.
I agree with you there. What was I just going to ask? It slipped my mind. But for me, you hit on a point about like certain books having a certain number. When it gets down to a certain grade or a certain value, people start to pounce, like the ASM 300s, the Hulk 181s. That's what I'm starting to see as well, especially with some silver as well, because I've noticed, like you touched on it earlier, with books dropping 50% or so, like they've fallen into the category of value where, hey, this book was $1,000. Now in this grade, it's $500, and the value is just, it's extreme to the point where I kind of have to buy this book because of where it is right now and the value it's giving me in order to buy it. Are you kind of seeing the same thing?
I am. I think, and don't get me wrong. There are guys who are primarily targeting certain books, right? As you know, there are guys who love their runs, FF, ASM, whatever it may be. They want to have, they are focused, laser focused on completing these runs. But there are some guys who don't take opportunities for granted. They take advantage of these moments. And right now, as in a buyer's market, guys who weren't necessarily going into a live sale, from what I'm seeing, who weren't looking at a Silver Age book, for example. They're more like in the bronze, or guys who were buying silver and not really looking at bronze horror, because right now that's another hot market, is the bronze, the Dave Stevens. They're buying them up when they come up because they realize that price definitely last year was 33% more. 2 years ago was 100% more. So I think the market's right now being dictated by pricing, but it's benefiting also the genres where some of the books would not necessarily sell, but they're selling because there's what I would consider a good investment value.
So let me ask this. What do you say to the people out there who don't want to catch the falling knife? And what I mean by that is a lot of the books have come down and they're afraid they're going to keep going down even more. So that's how I use that analogy. It's a stock term that I use when I buy and sell stocks, is that, what do you say to those people who are kind of afraid to pull the trigger right now?
All right. Since you brought up stock, I will tell you probably one of the best articles I read on these things, these circumstances, especially with investment, was an article that I can't remember exactly. It was decades ago, but they interviewed Berkshire Hathaway's Buffett, and one of the things he said is, if anybody comes to you and tells you that they bought at the very lowest and sold at the very highest, they're liars. And what he meant was, even in this buyer's market, you're going to see you'll see a little bit more of a decline in the value of the book. If you pick it up from, like, say, an ASM 129 and a 50, if you buy it at $900 right now, right? Which that was like almost a $1,500 book, 12, 15 months ago. And say it drops another couple of $100. Well, your percentage of fall is not as great as the one who bought it at 15 months ago. So, and even if it settles at, like, say, $750, at the least you have to say that you're at a comfortable level of a loss where you can wait till it rises back again. And that's true also with, the market. Sometimes you catch that lightning in a bottle, right? I don't know when it is, and I'm sure no one really knows what that is. But I think the important thing is, if you're going to buy because you really want to buy that book, and not just only for investment purposes, but if you love that book, you hear that as well, Lawrence.
Yeah, of
Buy what
course.
you love. And if you love something, you'll buy it. You're not going to really care about it. I'll give you a quick example. I just picked up last month Godzilla #1 35-cent variant, right? An 8.0 white pager. Those are like rare books because they experimented in 1977 with 35 cents versus what was being sold. So it was only a limited amount of like a few thousand that were out there in that 1 month in August of 1977. And I ended up, because I love that book, because I've had a book like that and I sold it and I regret selling it, I ended up giving away a Green Lantern 87 and a 9.2 off-white to white pages, and a Submariner #10, a 2.0 that was absolutely gorgeous book. Like, I think I probably gave up, I don't know, $1,900 in values in book for a book which is probably no more than $1,000. So
Yeah.
those are the things that you have to realize, is that it's not just so much about the investment in value, it's about the hobby itself. And if you love the book, whether you spend today and you get 10% less tomorrow, I think in the end, if you hold on long term, I think you'll do very well.
And that's, you just hit on it right at the end there, long term, right? I think a lot of people out there are too worried about tomorrow and the short term as opposed to the long term. Like you said, if you're buying a book because you want a book, that you like the book, you don't worry about it a week from now. You're worried about it 15, 10, 20 years from now. So I think you hit on that. So before I ask you a couple of questions, I do have a couple of questions from the chat that I want to relay to you. So here is one from Quasi Terrible. It says, "Hey John, what is the focus of your collection? Do you collect by era or by character or by publisher?"
All right, I can I show some examples?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so that's a good question. Like, I love a good Mad #1
I like that
for many
case.
reasons. Yeah, well, yeah, I have it in case. It's not a CGC case, but it's a case. I just had this pressed and clean. Can I plug someone, Frank from At Last
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Comics? All right, so he did a wonderful job. There's also I tend to love a lot of Frank Frazetta's work. So Famous Funnies 213, which is a very popular book. But like I said, I am a sucker for things like this too, which is that 35-cent variant, which is kind of a rare treat. I'm actually waiting tomorrow. I'll be here. I'm not going anywhere. I have a Star Wars #1 35-cent variant that's coming in the mail.
Now that I
So
know is a very expensive book, that Star Wars 35 center.
so I kind of feel like, if I'm collecting, part of it is rarity as opposed to scarcity. I kind of like the idea of it a more of a natural scarce book, but that doesn't necessarily always equal to rare. And I do go out. I mean, Lawrence, if anybody should talk about, collections, you have that beautiful Tech 31, the Batman #1. So you would know too, that focuses are usually based on nostalgia, things
Mhm.
that you grew up with, but also things that you aspire.
Exactly, and me and you talked about it a little bit before we come on the air about how sometimes you kinda have to trade one thing for something else, and that's basically what I did last year with those 2 books. So it's more about what you're willing to give up in order to get something that you really, really want. But, one other question we have before I wanna ask you, you mentioned Frank from Atlas Comics. Let me ask this first, then I'll get to this other question. So I know Frank does his own live sales. So is there ever any, like competition or something like that, or with you guys or no?
Oh no, I'm actually gonna host him soon, which is fun. He's got a great collection of books, and he's taking advantage of the market too, because when he bought those books versus now, why he's selling them is because he's chasing, bigger collections. Buyer's market also means for the vendors too, because they go after large collections and they know they can buy them at less than what was 2 years ago when they were paying a premium. But
Yeah,
no
that's
competition, Frank. Frank is very good at what he does, so I can learn a few things from him as well.
100% with the whole collection buying. I didn't even think of that, so that's a great point. How about any other rivalry with some of the other live sales? You ever hear anything from any of them or no?
Well, I used to do with a consignment page, and in the past with Grails, I did a few of their live sales, and I stepped down because I think it was a little time, like they are a full time committed consignment page, and they have tons of great books, as does Frank, constantly. Like, if you guys want a good deal, it's not just the live feed, it's the consignment, because the best thing about the consignment, and Lawrence, you can tell them, is that you can make as low as an offer as
Yep.
possible. No one is insulted because they play the middleman to going back to the seller. And there is a lot of negotiating in the background, because when I was hosting the live sales for Grails, for example, that consignment page, I would help out from time to time with their consignment page. So there is a lot of of benefits for also making offers on those consignment pages. But right now, if you go to any of them, you'll see that the books are priced right.
Yeah. So I agree with that. So I know I've told this story before, but if anybody hasn't heard this before, there was a Werewolf by Night 32, and you guys know that book has gotten demolished price-wise. It was a 9.0 with a great Moon Knight label on one of the consignment pages, and the book was sitting there for months and months and months. I reached out to the guy and I said, "This is still available?" He's like, "Yeah, it is." I'm like, I gave him like literally $1,000 under what he was asking. Just threw out an offer, and of course, he came back and said no. He's like, "This is the least that the amount the guys to take," and I said, "No, I'm not going to do that." But that's what John just said. Like, no one's going to say like come back and say, that's horrible of you, blah, blah, blah. They're going to take it in stride because they know the market. They know what certain books are worth. And they know if a book is sitting for that long, that it's probably not going to sell unless the person is willing to give it up for a deal.
Correct.
All right. So we have another question from Chico's Comics for you, John. He says, you work with some great sellers on IG. What trends have you seen on the live sales for the first part of 2024?
In terms of like the actual trend of a genre, if that's what it meant, I'm seeing Dave Stevens. Stevens is right now hot. I think there's a documentary on him right now. I can't remember what was it, Amazon or Netflix or one of those, and he's gained popularity out of the documentary, and I'm surprised because the artwork is incredible, but it's also a little risque, like his work, and I think that's what attracts a lot of the guys who buy them. And the continuance of the dominance of what I want to call with Bronze Age horror. It's one of the markets, Lawrence, where the guys who cannot afford to buy too much of the pre-code horror, which is just,
It's on
you
fire.
know, it's just on fire, but it's also unattainable because of the prices, especially Heritage. Like you see those prices, they never go down. Guys are more inclined to go after the horror books of the Bronze Age era, specifically the Neil Adams, the Wrightson covers, the Kaluta, the Orlando. Those are the ones that they're targeting. And of course, subject matter is very important, except if you're Wrightson. Anything Wrightson flies off the shelf.
Yeah, even House of Secrets 92. Every time I'm on a live sale, somebody's asking for it. It's like as soon as one comes up, it's gone. It's not even gives it like 30 seconds. It's off the board.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm 100%.
So let me ask you this: with the whole live sales, how many sellers are you actively working with right now?
Currently, I have the steady, as I refer to, steady four, and that's Marvel Comics, aka Jordan, or Jordy, as I refer to him, and my term of endearment, Dustin, aka Ray City Comics, Dustin Lineback, Paradise Comics up north of the border in Toronto with Peter and Christina, and Alan. Alan Barr, who's over at Heroes Comic Books, who, if you're out in Campbell, California, and you don't visit that store, I mean, you've just wasted time because he's got everything you want in that bookstore. But I'm also now slowly going to get back into hosting Bill Spinetti from Fantastic World Comics. And for those who don't know Bill, he'll tell you he taught Matt Nelson of CGC how to grade books. And Matt
Wow.
Matt took it to heart, everything about what Bill taught him, and hence has successfully created CGC Comics. And so I'll be hosting Bill along with his partner or his sidekick, Sidewinder Comics, Jordan, who is also with him at the store.
Another Jordan.
Another Jordan. There are plenty of them.
So all the guys you just mentioned, they're dealers, right? For the most part?
They're 100% dealers. All of them. Dustin has also a full-time job. He's a pitman for a NASCAR racer, but this is a serious job for him too. Like
I didn't know. Oh wow, Jordy's a pit guy. I did not know that. That is crazy.
Dustin is. Jordan is
Dustin.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Jordan is full-time comic book guy. His father was a comic book dealer, so he actually was an engineer pre-pandemic, and he left his job and he said, "I'm going to go do comic books," because he grew up with comic books with his father at their local comic shop. And
I was going to say, have you ever given thought to somebody selling personal collection through you on a live sale?
I would do it. Yes, absolutely. I've talked to many of the guys. I have one of my neighbors who has a small IG account. We've talked about it. The luxury is, I can walk over to his place and we can set up, and we don't have to do the dueling, top and bottom split thing, which is benefit. But many guys have approached me. I've done them in the past, and whether it be Sports Nerds, Greg, or I can tell you that I've done hundreds of private collectors in the past, small little 2-hour live sales, and it's a great I enjoy it.
All right. So everybody out there, if you're watching, John is open to taking on, personal collections. If you're interested in selling some books, I had to ask you something else and I totally forgot what it was now, but, any questions for John out there in the chat, please do not forget to put them down below in the chat. We have him for maybe about till the game starts, another 20 minutes, and I'm sure he's going to want to go watch the football games. But
I will say, Lawrence, I do have one rule. I never claim a book when I'm hosting. It's very difficult not to want to claim, but I never ever claim a book. I give everyone an opportunity, and 99.9% of the time, I never get the book I want during the live sale, but that very fractional amount, I'll reach out to the guys and see if I can strike a deal with them.
All right, there you go. So he's not sniping you guys. I don't know if I could do that. I would probably, if I saw like the preview, and John always puts out previews of whoever he's dealing with for that live sale. So I'm always checking them out, whether it's Jordy or Dustin Lineback, and they have some amazing, amazing books. I'm always looking to see what they have. But let me ask your opinion on something, because it's a hot debate right now in the community about CGC, what's going on. What's your opinion on the whole thing? Do you submit books to CGC or CBCS or whoever?
I mostly buy slab books. I have only submitted a handful, but I've done it through Jordan's account, Marvel Comics, because in the past he used to press books, and I used to submit it to him, and he would send them to me. I don't necessarily have an opinion. The only thing I can say is, just like anything else in any business, there's going to be some sort of highlighted event, which it's only a lesson where they can improve on whatever it is, their services. I know some people don't necessarily care. From word from a lot of the vendors, a lot of the consigners, I can tell you there are many guys who are continuing to buy without even flinching, because they too know that CGC will, eventually, you know, uh, they'll they know it's an evolving industry. What they are, everybody can learn from it, including the other two third-party graders, the CBCS and PGX as well. I think like a car, the first cars that came out to what we have now, there's a huge gap of like how the evolution of the automobile. And I know it's just a case that says a grade, but I think now the whole idea is to have a case which is secure, that there could be trust in some of the community that which has lost that trust. But as far as I'm concerned, I don't think that shouldn't be a determining factor in terms of whether you're collecting or not. You should trust your own instincts too when you're buying. If the book doesn't appear to be the grade that's up there on the top, because you hear that all the time, right?
Yeah.
You guys say, I look at that photo and it doesn't look like a 9.8. It's got multiple spline ticks. How can that be a 9.8? Well, your instinct alone is very good to tell you maybe it's not the book to buy. And
Yeah.
if the deal is too good to be true, it's too good to be true.
So here's a question that I'm currently dealing with, and I've been dealing with it for about a year and a half. Is that I'm mainly right now a raw collector, and I've noticed also, at least on a lot of the live sales, that I see a lot of people looking for raw books. Is that something that you also see in the live sale, or are still people buying slabs as they were early on? For me, I've been hunting raws for about a year and a half only right now.
Yeah, I think, and you probably do for the same reasons that some of the guys buy. The reason why they buy, yes, they buy a lot of raws. That's a lot more than what people in the past wanted. Everyone wanted an encased, book. But I think now with the market the way it is, people would rather own, collectors would rather own the book, and whatever grade it is based on the assessment of it being raw, because they can get it for less. You can also, like, I don't want to use the word beat down the seller, but what you can do is you can reason with them and say, all right, you're selling it as a 5.0. 5.0s are selling for that, but they're encased. They've
Yeah.
been pressed. They've been cleaned. So you can add, those reasons to kind of get the price down, and that's why a lot of collectors now picking up raw books, because they use that to their advantage. I will tell you one thing: there are a lot of live sales guys who never, at least the guys that I host, they don't, even though the book looks like a 5.0, they will say it's a 4.0, because they want to make sure that you benefit from it. You're buying it at a lower price. And also they don't want to go through the trouble of either crediting a buyer or having to pay for the shipping to get the book back, because that's a loss. And then you restock, you have more inventory. And in a market where things can just go from $10 to $5 in a week, it's probably best that you sort of you're more conservative when you're giving a pricing grade on those raw books.
And that's what I've seen as well. A lot of the dealers, especially on your channel or other people's, live sales, is that right now there are a lot of dealers willing to give deals on books, especially raws or maybe on CGC or CBCS graded books that have been kind of sitting for a while. Do you ever hear from a dealer or the guys that you deal with that say, you know what, I've had these slabs here for a while. Um, let me either reduce the price or possibly crack it out. It's easier for me to sell, or you'll never hear that.
No, but what I hear is pick your battles is what the term is that I hear a lot from the vendors, from the dealers. And that's what right now in the current market, a medium valued book, slab, whatever it may be, they're thinking, if I can get less for it, I'm happy. Like in terms of getting less back from selling it. That's from what I have into it, because that's your buying as also as a vendor. That's your spending money, right? And you can go back, you can take advantage of the buyer's market and go buy yourself a big collection. But I think you'll see a lot more resistance with the books that are uh, like a Grail, like an AF-15, an FF1, Batman #1, all those books. Guys are not willing to negotiate. Guys, meaning the guys who are selling, are not willing to negotiate on those, because they know that there's still value into them, regardless of what a lot of the GPA says. And they know that those in the next 5-10 years, they'll see a premium added to it. But I think the lesser of the value of that is when people say, choose your battles,
Yeah.
because those are the ones that you'll see that they move a lot more. And look, if there's an old case, an old label, everyone takes advantage of it. They'll buy it, they'll press it, they'll look at the greatest. As well, I get asked all the time on the live sale, John, can you look up the CGC notes, right?
Yep.
And why do they ask me that? Is because they want to know whether or not there are defects in those grader notes that would benefit them if they buy it as like a 7.0. Can it be an 8.0? I sold a 6.0 Star Trek #1 with an old label. I just read the grader notes. The guy picked it up. I hate jocks. 1692. Steven Smith. He got it back as an 8.0 after he pressed and cleaned it.
Yeah. That's a big thing now with the whole pressing and cleaning and cracking out books. So I mean, I think that's why the whole people are up in arms with the whole scam thing with CGC. But here's a question from Chico's. It is a good question. I don't know if you remember this, but what is one of the most expensive books sold on one of your sales? You remember that?
Oh my God, there's a couple of them, but let me think about this. There was, gosh, there are plenty of X-Men that have sold, Hulk ones, but I think it was, I think it may have been a pre-code horror book. It was one of those. God, it's at the tip of my tongue now. I'm forgetful, but I think it was in the range of $20,000, and
Wow.
I believe Jordy had it on his live sales. So there's significant amount of books. I will say one thing: I've had one live sale where we sold $108,000 in books in that one live sale.
Wow. That is crazy.
Yep, $108,000 in sales. And when I mean on average, like if I take that into consideration, there's been $50,000-$60,000 in sales. The live sales I've host are between 22 and a half and $23,500 on each show in terms of sales.
Wow, that is awesome. So people out there are saying that comic books are going down in value, maybe, but people are still going crazy hand over fist buying books when you're hearing that each live sale is $20,000 worth of sales. So that is a lot. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah,
That
and
is
it's a
awesome.
and it's and it. I can't take credit for it. Again, I'm just the guy who's writing things down and making sure that the chat and who's trying to claim something and who's making offers. But it's a testament to the guys, because they're hustling. And I love a good hustle. When these guys go out there and they're hustling to pick up collections, just knowing they can sell it to you guys for a lot less than what you thought you can go buy it at any other place. That is what, at least from conversation from Jordan, from Dustin, from Peter and Christina, from Alan, from Jordan and Bill, all the guys that I've hosted, that's their main objective is like, we're out there hustling right now. The market is primed for that. We're picking up collections and we want to resell them to you guys so that you can put that book in your collection knowing that you bought it at a better price than what it was year and a half ago.
That's awesome. So I've gone to some cons recently. Everybody knows that we talked about it on probably my last live stream. Was that when I go to shows, a lot of the dealers are crazy. That's why I've been saying if you're on IG, like the dealers are definitely willing to work with you. Like they want to sell books. And now when you told me that $20,000 price tag for one sale, I mean that tells me these guys want to move books and gals, I should say. So that is tremendous. So kudos to you for sticking with this. You plan on keep going with this? How long is it going to be a full-time thing eventually or?
As I get from like my, I'm an empty nester with my wife, one is married, moved away, the other one's still in college, and so the rat race for me has slowed down. I still do what I do because as my wife said, if you want to continue buying books, you got to keep working.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But she also enjoys the time alone when I'm doing this. So it gives her some alone time and benefit while I'm doing this. And you know what? I find that on my worst days at the let's say at the office, when I come home and I go live, I forget everything because it's just strictly comics. And comics are like, for me, it always are, my past. So I can sort of like become that, 10, 12-year-old kid again at the local sip and smoke, throwing in constant, change at the pinball machine or the early Pac-Man and Donkey Kong and picking up at the end whatever change I had, a comic book on my way out the door. So I think I'll do it as long as people keep coming in to the live sales. And, if I see that there, I can't get more people to come on, it's a sign that I need to kind of allow the next generation of live sales hosts to come in, and I'm happy to bow out.
It's a great thing that you just said that about the whole Pac-Man and just 'cause this always as a collector, especially if you've been doing it for a long time, it kind of relays everything back to a simpler time when we were kids doing all this stuff. And you said it, it's kind of like an escape. My wife is like the same way. I know she gets annoyed sometimes when I'm down here doing this and she's upstairs doing what, but most of the time she doesn't say anything, but she gives me that time to go ahead and vent and talk about comics and the other stuff that we love. So regardless, Chris says, I want to, hey, Lawrence, tell John, put it on my tab norm. So I hope you know what that means.
Way to go, Chris. Nice to see you, man. Chris the Skipper.
All right. So, oh, wait, here we have another question. I'm going to give you this question and then I'm going to give you the floor to say what you want. And then we'll let everybody go watch football. So Michael says, have you ever had a seller, what was a little unreasonable with their prices? So have you ever had a seller that was a little unreasonable? That's a good question.
I have to be honest with you. There's behind the scenes in every sale before when you start working with someone, and part of that is to remove these unreasonable expectations because sellers have to be real time, as I say, because comic books move at a fast pace, and we have access to every sale. And if that seller is unfamiliar with the real time sales, I'm going to be hosting more of what I refer to as Night at the Museum because the books will sit up there and people will just admire them. And I would rather not waste the person who I'm hosting their time or the buyers because they're smart. One thing I want to say is the IG buyers, the collectors, are probably the smartest, savviest collectors I have ever met. Period. Bar none. There's no other up-to-date guy that knows anything and everything. They are the ones.
There you go. We're all geniuses. All right. So that's it. John, I want to thank you for coming on the show. I'm going to give you the floor with anything you have left to say before we end this thing. But again, I really appreciate it. I know it was impromptu. So again, I thank you.
I just want to thank you, Lawrence. Thank you for the invite. I really appreciate it. And if I can just say to anybody anything is that if you guys ever have any questions about comic books, get together, ask each other questions. I think that's part of it. The community is a community because people trust each other. And the way you trust each other is you share information, because if I know something that I'm not privy to buy or anything, or I know of something that is out there that could benefit somebody else, I'm sharing that information immediately when it pops up, because I want to see people succeed. And that's the whole thing, is that I don't care whether I'm hosting 5, 6, 7, 8 guys. I want them to succeed, but I want to see the rest of the community succeed, because that's an indicator of a thriving market in the collectibles, especially comic books. So if I can tell anybody anything, is share, reach out to the guys, ask questions, and where are you? Oh, and follow Lawrence.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. So last thing, any upcoming sales this week that you want to tell people about?
Thursday, tune in, 6:30 Eastern. I'm hosting Dustin Lineback. I put out a reel. I don't know if you've seen it, but there's an ASM 9.6 stand signature on there. And I do want to say one thing. It was an old label 9.2, and he cracked it, he pressed it, it got a 9.6. So as I often say, in Dustin, I trust.
Yes, definitely. He always has some crazy great books. I brought my Batman 121 from him, so I still have that as well. So, John,
Awesome.
thank you again for coming on. I really appreciate it. And last thing, go Jets. Hopefully next year we're better than this year. All right.
Thank you,
All right,
Lawrence.
guys.
Appreciate it.
From both of us, have a great Sunday afternoon.